I feel like real-time multimedia programming is a topic that could always be used to, covered more. And I think TouchDesigner is a platform that really makes some cool stuff possible. So a little bit about me. My name is Subi Raman. You can go ahead and tweet at me there if you'd like. I have a background in music composition. And I also work as a software engineer at Duo Security. Duo is a company. We work around securing different types of access. And, we're based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. I used to live in New York, and my apartment looked kind of like this. And I moved to Michigan, and my apartment looks like that. So if y'all are interested, we are hiring. But to sort of launch into the talk, I think this is a really exciting time to get into graphics programming. The computer to make this video cost $400,000. This guy cost even more. So, when you think about that, you're able to do quite a bit on your laptops or even your phones now with dedicated graphics processing units. My own personal interest, as a composer, I've always been fascinated by visualization, the different ways that music can be used to create and transform geometry. This is a music video for a track by Autechre. I can sort of turn up the audio so you can sort of hear it. You can see as the sound's changing, the geometry is changing too in a pretty interesting way. So I started playing around with existing tools. Unity is an interesting tool that's out there. I felt the process to get from idea to reality was a bit tricky because there's a lot of game-oriented concepts in Unity. Jitter is another interesting tool. It's part of Max MSP. But my girlfriend clued me into TouchDesigner, and really quickly I was doing super interesting stuff with it. That's my cat, Zeus. He's always wanted to be a star here in New York, so bravo, Zeus. And so, really quickly, just able to do interesting things like that. It's very visual, it's very visceral, you can see every step of the way, it's cool stuff. So it's a visual development platform that equips you with tools you need to create a lot of stuff. It's made by these folks in Derivative. They're based out of Toronto, and free and commercial versions are available. And so, within a few weeks, I was doing stuff like this. This is me. I'm capturing my body shape with a Kinect. It's being mapped into a 3D space, and then flame-like particles are being emitted from my body, which was a pretty cool thing to do, and it ended up happening really, really quickly, which was nice. This is another experiment I did. It's using, you can see my bookcase sort of in the background. It's using my bookcase as source material to generate this spiral kaleidoscope-like pattern using visual feedback techniques. This was an installation I did this summer at a festival. You can see that there's a dancer in front of it. There's a Kinect sort of at the bottom there and a screen. And as he's dancing, the shape of his body is being projected onto the screen, and various interesting transformations are happening in 2D and 3D space. This was a really rewarding project for me because people who don't really enjoy dancing, they would see their bodies on the screen transformed, and it would invite them to move, and they would lose some of their inhibitions around dancing, which was really rewarding to see. So getting into how TouchDesigner works, it uses visual nodes. They're called operators, and they each represent a particular type of operation. And each operator has inputs and outputs. So there are 4 different types of operators, and we'll talk about them. The first big one are texture operators. Textures are things like images and videos, and these are operators that provide, manipulation of them on your GPU. And so what does that mean? Let's go ahead and look at TouchDesigner. So I'm going to this network here, and you can see I have a network happening, and that is you. That's all of you right there. So you all look amazing, and you're going to be making art right now. And I'm grabbing the edges of your body using this operator here. This output is going into this input, and it's using neighboring pixels to calculate where the edges are. And then what's happening over here is I'm overlaying this animated noise pattern over your bodies to create this sort of psychedelic effect. And then we can go even further, and there's this displace operator, and it's displacing the pixels in this operator with the RGB values in the pixels in this operator to create this sort of watery, shimmery effect. And then, at the end, I'm doing some fine tuning, and the result looks like that. That's your body's, really quickly. I did this in 5 minutes maybe, and it's pretty cool. And we can move on to surface operators. Surface operators work in the 3D world. These are operators that generate, import, and modify 3D geometry. So, taking a look at a sample surface network, we have a sphere here. It's pretty cool. You can do things like, edit its radius. It provides all these parameters here for things to do with, and you can plug that into a pipeline as well. And you can see I have a noise operator here that's similar to the noise pattern before. It's transforming the vertices of this sphere here to create this interesting liquid-like blob, which is pretty cool. But some of you may have noticed, or some of your minds might be blown. You're watching the T-Rex on the dirt bike, and it's great. But some of you are like, this is a Python conference. Like, get this guy off the stage. So what if I told you that every operator in TouchDesigner is indeed a Python class? And I will demonstrate it here. If I go up here, I can pull up a text port, and we see something familiar. It's a Python interpreter. And so what I can do here, let me try and make it visible. I can select this sphere here. I'm going to use this global op function, and then I provide a path to it, and it returns a class. In this case, it's a sphere SOP class. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to programmatically change the x radius of it. The API, you can explore it yourself, but you just do .par.radx. I can change it to 2. You can see the radius changed. And if I zoom out here, you can see that affects the noise pattern there. You can do things like increment things in place, stuff like that. So what I'm getting at here is that Python is a first-class citizen of TouchDesigner, and it can be used to do some really cool possibilities. So what overall, like GPU programming can be really, really difficult. And TouchDesigner, it's providing like this intuitive Pythonic interface to do this work, which is really great. So moving on to channel operators. These deals with channels, which are things like processing and generating waveforms, processing data from inputs, and using timing events and stuff like that. So in practice, it looks like this. You can see I have a network here. I have an audio file. I'll go ahead and play it. Okay, so it looks like some stuff is happening. You can see the audio file is playing. It looks like I'm grabbing the max amplitude out, and then it looks like it's being rendered out into this texture here. And down here, we can see some Python code. So if I take a look at it, what I'm doing is essentially, I'm grabbing the samples in this audio file, or the left channel of this audio file. I first grab the operator. I'm setting the values of the channel into a NumPy array, and then I'm using NumPy to just grab the maximum value out of those samples, which, I'm not a signals guy or electrical engineer, but hopefully that's close to the max amplitude. And then there's some boilerplate down here to set it into the script channel operator, which is set here. And you can see it's jumping around a little bit, so I added this lag operator to slow down the jumping, and it's being rendered out here into this texture. And we can go even further. We can pull up our old friend, this sphere SOP, and then I can just click here, drag it, export it to the X radius, and you can see the X radius changing. So, cool. So, what I'm getting at here is that we're taking an audio stream, we're passing it into Python code, and the results of that Python code are being piped into a video stream. And when I realized that could happen, it like blew my mind. Like a platform that allows us to do this in like very little code, but enables Python developers to do a lot, it's pretty cool stuff. So let me go ahead and stop this. Cool. And Data operators. These are operators used for things like running Python scripts in response to events, storing data, and retrieving data from network sources. So I'll briefly go over those. Cool. So we have a button here, and we have a channel here, which is the output of the button. And there's a Python script in here as well. And all that's happening here is you can see that it looks like I'm doing some TouchDesigner related things, like I'm essentially grabbing the parent of this operator and I'm creating a sphere. So let's see what that looks like. And indeed, it created a sphere. And you get a sphere, and you get a sphere, and everybody gets spheres. What I'm getting at here is that, so with Python, we can generate really, really complex networks of geometry and transformations to geometry. And going back, here's an example of a really complex UI created in TouchDesigner that controls this really complex 3D projection. This is an example of a UI built in TouchDesigner that controls like a lighting system and uses the DMX protocol. If you've worked with LEDs, you might be familiar with the DMX protocol. But here's something even more cool. Because it uses Python, you can build a user interface to really any Python-based application. So for example, here I have another button, and I have some code here. And I imported subprocess, and when this button is clicked, essentially I'm going to have my computer sing some Taylor Swift to me. Welcome to New York, it's been waiting for you. So let's see that happen.
Welcome to New York, it's been waiting for you.
Brilliant. Next week in Madison Square Garden. So, this is a really simple example, but, any Python script application you have can be controlled with TouchDesigner. So, live demo. So if you have your phones on you, you can go to this website, bit.ly/nyctouch. And there's always the chance it'll end up like this squirrel, which would be equally entertaining. But you will see a client that looks like this. Let me reload it. Cool, so we have some users logging on. That's awesome. And let me load it up over here first. And I'll explain what's going to happen. Cool. So I'm going to demo what's called a pixel relocator. I learned it at a workshop in Toronto a few weeks ago. What's going to happen is live video of you. It's going to be mapped onto particles in 3D space. Each particle will be relocated by a 3D noise field. And the strength of the relocation will be caused by the music playing as well as some variables you choose. And you'll be able to choose things like the type of song. It looks like y'all are into funk maybe. You'll be able to choose your favorite color. You'll be able to choose if you're super serious or you want to go into beast mode, you sort of can. So I welcome you to place your votes there. And then I think this should have loaded. Cool. Let's take a look. Oh, someone voted for Britney Spears. You guys are voted for green, it looks like. Okay, now we have modern jazz. Back to Britney. Back to Britney. Okay. So, let me turn it back down, and I'll let you guys view that a little more later. So, what's happening there? So, what we're doing is we're first communicating over a WebSocket. You and TouchDesigner are communicating over a WebSocket. This is built on Scenic, which is a really great asynchronous micro framework. This is the basic code to make that happen on the server. The meat of it is down here. Every half second, I'm sending data to all of you and to TouchDesigner. And there's some other code here involved in setting up the WebSockets and keeping track of clients. And TouchDesigner it's super cool because it does have a native WebSocket client used to receive the data that you're sending. And a Python script is parsing the data and notifying TouchDesigner of changes. So we can view that. Oh, we're back to funk. You guys keep changing your minds. We can view that here. The code is essentially here. If there's no data, don't do anything. Grab the data, parse the JSON data, and then there's some boilerplate involved here in creating the channels and appending that data to the channel. And if I go back to Touch, which is over here, you can see that the choices you made are being reflected here. It looks like there's 15 of you voting. You guys have chose this, this, this. Oh, we're on classical now, cool. So starting out, many projects start with using some sort of texture as a starting point. You can see the texture right over here, which is a video file, which is the video input of all of you. You all still look beautiful. And then we generate geometry. In this case, this is using over 900,000 vertices, which I think is pretty cool. And the geometry generation is happening up here. You can see these blue surface operators representing our geometry, and they're being passed into this geometry component. How are the particles being moved around? Well, it's using OpenGL shader code. Shaders are sort of beyond the scope of this particular talk. So in this case, you can just assume that I'm drawing the rest of the owl, but I promise you that it's happening. Post-processing. This is where your rendered video are cleaned up, and you can do neat things like adding video feedback loops, adding blur, other stuff like that. And remember, this is all happening on the GPU, so it's less expensive than geometry work. And you can see this sort of feedback loop happening here. This is where you can pass like frames and compose the previous frame onto the current frame to make various interesting effects happening. So I'll let you guys look at that again for a brief second. This is what it looks like now. Looks like we are listening to jazz. Cool. Okay, we're back to Brittany. Okay, you guys can't make up your mind. Cool. So some final thoughts. Like I said, graphics programming can be really intimidating. This is the OpenGL pipeline. There's a lot of learning. It's a very, very complex system of things to remember and keep in your head. And as Python programmers, I think we're used to really intuitive types of ways of programming that are very self-documenting and easy to self-learn. And getting from an idea to doing something like this, like most people can't conceive it, but this was done in TouchDesigner. This guy, Vincent House, is using a Connect point cloud as a collision surface that collides with this like fluid-like texture, which is just really mind-blowing, which is so cool. But this is stuff that TouchDesigner is capable of. And it provides a really intuitive way to start exploring graphics programming. And I think best of all, it enables all of us to think really, really big about our next project. Cool. So that's it from me. You can tweet me with questions. Here's some reading. Matthew Regana has some really great tutorials. But besides that, are there any questions? Oh, you can download the free version here. It's available on their website. The one I'm using is the free version. That's the free version, yeah. So it's very, very capable. Yeah? The code I used for this particular project? It is not open source. I imagine I could make it open source, though. Yeah. All right. If you have any other questions, feel free to tweet it at me, but I'll just let this go for a little while. Thank you all.